So welcome everybody to our 2023 Halloween event. We're really glad you all made it. Feel free to talk to people around you. If they're here, it's because they want to hang out and talk to other people. If while the speaker is talking or the um, movie's playing, please don't come down and run across the stage and stuff like that. And also, if you go around behind the stage, which I am pointing to, like you can actually see where I'm pointing. It's on the other side of the stage over here. There are these areas marked with lines and like glowing lines. If you go inside those areas, there are voice conversation areas where nobody can hear what you're talking about outside of that area. So you can actually go back there and have a whole conversation and not disturb anybody else. It's kind of cool. And we have multiple zones, so you can break it up however you want. So anyway, I'd like to welcome you all here to our event. And our speaker this evening has been spoken here multiple times. He's an excellent speaker. Is Jonathan Bar-Or. He's presenting a spooky story about a 33-year-old buffer overflow, a very dangerous Dave. Now, we were speculating intensely over what this could possibly be in that would still be a valid executable today that's 33 years old. So I'm looking very forward to this, to see what he says. JBO is from DEF CON Group 9723 in Tel Aviv, Israel. Jonathan is a principal security researcher at Microsoft, working as the Microsoft Defender research architect for cross-platform. Jonathan has a rich experience in vulnerability research, exploitation, cryptanalysis, and offensive security in general. So everybody, welcome to the stage, JBO.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. Let me share my screen. One cool thing about, let's see if you guys see it. I hope you guys can see the slides. One very cool thing about the
yes, we can see them.
Thank you. One very cool thing about Frame is that you can actually click on the on where I show my slides, and you can zoom in, so you can feel just like as if you're watching on your computer or phone or whatever it is. So this is a very dangerous Dave, I guess. If you're familiar with the game, then probably your back hurts a bit, just like mine. This is a story about Dangerous Dave. Well, first of all, I want to talk about why, I mean, what that thing is and a bit of a background. I used to be a 90s kid. I was born in the 80s, but grew up in the 90s. And if you remember Sound Blaster, Turbo buttons, WAD files for Doom and MS-DOS were all the rage at that time. The internet was a bit down. And we had a very low selection of games to play. As I said, the internet was down and so on. And it's really funny that X-Ray mentioned floppy disks. This is exactly how we used to have games, right? And it's really amazing, like the technology at that time. I mean, it looks very primitive compared to what we have today, but like it's amazing to me that you could fit like entire games on games in plural on floppy disks. So one of those games was Dangerous Dave. It was released in 1990, therefore 33 years ago. If you remember ID or id Software, the folks that had John Romero and basically the guys that released Doom, those are the guys. These are the guys that released Dangerous Dave. And one of the first bugs I've ever discovered happened in Dave, but I never really, when I was in the 90s, I discovered it by accident, but I never really dug deeply into why that happens. I didn't have, the capacity to do it. But at one point, like if this year actually, I woke up and like in the morning and said, you know what, like this is a weekend project, I'm going to work on that. So what's up with Dave? Apparently there is some plot, but I mean, I've never met a person that knows what the plot is, but there is some plot. Dave is basically a platform game. There is a lot of emphasis on jumping and so on. From platform to platform. That's why it's called the platform game. There is a lot of emphasis on jumping. The game has only 10 levels, and the goal in each level is to collect a trophy and pass through a door. And as a side note, without getting hit by anything, which are water, fire, spiders, and then weird creatures, or falling into a pit and so on. So that's it. That's Dangerous Dave. After Dangerous Dave, there were a couple of I think there was Dangerous Dave 2 released or whatnot, and I believe for the Apple II there was a different version of Dangerous Dave, but I'm talking about the 1990 Dangerous Dave for MS-DOS, which is very, very well known for old timers, I guess. There are various other elements in the game. First of all, there are items. You can collect diamonds and such, and they basically boost your score. There is a high score, of course, just like any other game in the 90s. There are also two special items. One of them is called a gun that can fire at enemies, and the other one is called a jetpack that has fuel and can basically lift you up in the air without you jumping and stuff like that. There are lives known as Daves in the game. You basically start with 3 lives, and every time you touch like a spider or water or whatever, you lose 1. When your lives are over, it's game over. And lastly, there is a score. As I said, there is a high score, and it increases by collecting items. Every 20,000 points give you an extra life. Unless you already had 3, which is the maximum number of lives. So that's a bit of a premise about Dave. This is how it looks like. So here you can see the number of Daves that I have. These are 2 Daves, meaning that I already lost 1 life. My score is 14,150. I'm in level 4 out of 10, as I mentioned. I have a jetpack with this amount of fuel, and I already collected the trophy, so it says go through the door. I'm supposed to go right in this level specifically. So besides the 10 levels, there are kind of bonus stages. Some levels have those bonus stages that are called warp zones. They look like that when you warp into them, I guess, and you get to them by going out of bounds. And they usually have rare items that would boost your score. So you probably want to go there. Some of them are quite perilous, but I mean, in most cases, it's worth going there. And this is an example. This is level 5. And in this level, you're supposed to climb up the tree and go, and then jump left beyond the screen, beyond the bounds. And then you go into the first warp zone. That's specifically the first warp zone that you encounter in the game. And as a kid, I wanted to hunt for all warp zones by going out of bounds. And most warp zones locations were kind of trivial. In this case, like you immediately discovered that you can climb on the tree, so you immediately want probably to go left and see what's up there. And this will lead you to the warp zone that you see here. Or a different warp zone. So that's what I discovered as a kid. I think I was kind of imaginative, I would say, and I started looking for warp zones that are in unusual places. And an interesting fact is that this is the door that you're supposed to go through after you get the trophy. Once you hit that door, you basically finish the level. An interesting fact is that before taking the trophy, the door behaves like an empty space. So this is level 6. The idea that I had as a kid is not to collect the trophy, just go through the door. I have a jetpack, so I can reach that door actually, and then go left and go into a new warp zone that no one ever talked about. And that's what I discovered. This is how it looks like when you go to that warp zone. As you can see, this looks very glitchy. This still, if you're able to download Dangerous Dave, which is probably very easy to find online, you can actually play it online, I think even. And you do what I said. You have to survive until level 6 and then go left after not collecting the trophy and getting through the door. You basically hit that thing, and your entire basically game freezes and you can't do anything. So that's what I discovered as a kid. I even recorded a video of myself doing that. So here is the full. It was recorded with DOSBox. That's how you play Dave these days. So I collected the jetpack. I have a gun, so I hit that like enemy basically. Now I go right. The trophy is on the right. I'm supposed to go a few screens to the right, and then the trophy would be there. But I was a smartass, basically decided to go through the door with the jetpack going left, and then you can already see that the warp zone looks a bit weird. But then here, this is how it looks like, and gets glitched out, and you finish like that. So this is like the demonstration of what I discovered a lot of years ago. Um, a few years later, and when I say a few, I mean a lot, I finally had decided to solve that mystery. Excuse me. And my first instinct was basically opening Dave, which was a monolithic binary, by the way. The entire game was in one single file called dave.exe. Put it in IDA or Ghidra or my favorite reverse engineering tool and find out what's going on. Now, one thing that's important about reverse engineering is that it's an expensive and slow process. It takes a lot of time, especially in if you reverse engineer binary from those old days, because they used a lot of proprietary stuff. Um, and I still decided to do it just for the fun of it. And there were not a lot of meaningful strings and very high entropy of the file. And that kind of tells me that the file is either encrypted, very low chance, but could be it, or compressed in some way. But luckily, it's been a few years. The world has changed. We have the internet. And I was like, okay, let's see if someone has reversed engineered Dave.exe before. And I discovered a modding community called Shikari.net. If you're unfamiliar with the term Shikari, then you should play Commander Kin, which is another excellent game by the same company, actually. And I won't spoil what a Shikari is. Anyway, that's the modding community that I discovered. And the modding community has had very good data on Dave.exe, including the compression algorithm, which was a modified Lempel-Ziv compression algorithm, and even an exe to decompress. So you can really download their exe, take the original Dave.exe and decompress it, just like you do with UPX or anything else. And the uncompressed file is now this size, like 172K, almost twice as the original size. So the compression was pretty good. It's amazing to see how much they worked hard on saving disk space those days. The next step for me was to discover how levels are maintained in memory. Obviously, again, the goal is to understand where that weird warp zone comes from and where the mistake was. And Shikari.net had very good, albeit sometimes inaccurate data about how levels are arranged in the exe, uncompressed exe, of course. And basically, levels are an array of bytes, and each byte is a reference to to a tile, which is kind of like a sprite. And sprites are compressed, yes, double compression. I don't know whether it was in their benefit or not. I didn't check. Usually, double compression is not a good idea. And there was one user there named Maizure that had very good utilities for extracting the levels and tiles. And he even tried recreating Dave in C++ SDL, which was kind of unsuccessful, in my opinion. I downloaded it, tried to play it. It's not the same thing, but I mean, it was a very good attempt, to be honest. And Azure and the entire Shikari.net community with their notes helped me quite a lot. Now, these are all of the levels, actually. I mentioned that there are 10 levels. This PMP was basically extracted with Mazure's utility that extracts the level data and the tiles. Interestingly, you can see, first of all levels have the same length, which is kind of very easy to maintain. But secondly, one of the things that you can see is that some of the warp zones are actually kind of embedded inside those levels. So for example, level 1 is very, very small, but the entire right side, well, this is not a warp zone per se, but still, where it is, I don't remember. But some of those levels are kind of embedded within one another. So basically, that's a very good way to save memory in disk space if you think about it. As I said, there are 10 levels. The warp zones are embedded. And that's an example that I have is level 2 contains the level 5 warp zone. So this is level 2 where they hid like somehow a PCR, like I don't know what that stands for, but whatever. So this is level 2, how it looks like. But then if you go to the warp zone that I showed you earlier, the one that you jump from the tree and go left, then you get here to the right side of level 2. And you basically start in the top there and go towards the water, but you can dodge that really easily. So so that's very interesting, and you understand how they're saved in memory. And each combined level, as I said, there are 10 of those, basically takes 10 by 100 tiles or 10 by 100 bytes, which is constant. And it makes memory access coding very, very easy because you basically take, you can treat the levels as like all the levels as a big array. With constant element sizes. Here's the level structure. This is how it was described in Shikari.net. Each level is exactly 500 hexabytes worth of memory, or 1280 bytes. The first 256 bytes are animation and path data that describes how creatures move and stuff like that. It's interesting but irrelevant for this research because I didn't care about that. The next 1000 bytes, which is 10 by 100, are tiles. As I said, every byte is basically a reference to some array that contains all the tiles, so it makes sense. And then the last 24 bytes are, it says that they're unused. I don't think they're unused really, but I didn't really dive into it. And there is one extra level for the opening screen. When you open Dave, it looks like it says Dangerous Dave and has like a little maze, if you will. And that's a special kind of level that is maintained somewhere else in memory. It only contains tiles, so it does not adhere to this general format. And it's 70 bytes, 10 by 7. Something about the level metadata. Other memory locations there, other memory locations contain level metadata. So there are memory locations that contain the level data itself, and there are memory locations that contain the level metadata. And these are the two interesting ones. First of all, there is an initial state, which is an array of 10 elements, which kind of contains the initial X and Y coordinates of Dave in each level, and the initial state of Dave. And there are two possible options for that. Either Dave is stationary or falling. Excuse me. And there is warp zone metadata, which is the interesting part for us. There are 10 elements there. The initial X coordinate of Dave. The Y coordinate is constant and baked into the code, basically. It was probably a C define or something. The horizontal level position, as you remember, this like warp zones are embedded into normal levels. So you got to basically save somewhere where the level starts horizontally from the level that it's baked in. So that kind of emphasizes how warp zones are embedded into regular levels, and that data is maintained. And there is an interesting note here that this 10 elements, there are 4 non-zero values and 6 zeros in those arrays, which kind of proves that level 6 warp zone was not planned, because I already knew when I was a kid about 4 warp zones anyway. So that kind of tells me that level 6 warp zone is probably someone missed something and not like a planned warp zone that went out of control. At this point, I decided to code my own level parser or editor. It turned out to be an editor later. This is how it looks like. Basically, you give it dave.exe and it knows how to parse the levels there. And this is how level 8 looks like, for instance. Um, it even tells you where you start. You start at 2 by 8. You start stationary, and then I kind of translated all the different tiles to something that looks like ASCII art, which looks terrible, to be honest. There is a warp zone here that is mapped to level 6 that starts at 71.0 while falling. And then this thing is a tree, that thing right there. So my ASCII art was not that bad. It still looks kind of like a tree, kinda. Okay, so at this stage, I was pretty happy. I knew that I understand like how the layout looks like pretty well. And at this stage, I was like, okay, I haven't unpacked dave.exe, and I had a couple of useful strings already. If you remember before unpacking, I didn't have any useful strings, but now I did. And here is one that is presented when you finish the game, which kind of hints how the plot was supposed to look like. So it says something that you made it through all the perilous areas of Clyde, which Clyde's hideout, which is apparently the villain in Dave's story. And this is kind of cool that you can see that. But more interestingly, you can actually see that it says, did you find all the 4 warp zones? They are located on levels 5, 8, 9, and 10. So that again proves to me that there is no warp level that was blended level 6. Just jump off the top of the screen at the extreme left or right edges, and voila. So that's pretty interesting. The more interesting thing, however, was looking for cross references. If you look for cross references for the string, it might be useful. My assumption was that there is a function that is called when the level is finished and basically checks if the level number is 10. If it is, then the message will be presented. Otherwise, you basically move to the next level. So imagine a function called onLevelFinish or something like that. So that was my thinking, and indeed, I found my suspicion. Look at this code. This is pseudocode, but immediately you can see a bunch of things. First of all, you can see that this word 56F4, if this thing is less than 10, then do something, right? So it's pretty clear if you have 10 levels that this word 56F4 is the current level. Assuming that, you can see that it's also increased. So that function is indeed the assumed onLevelFinish or something function. More than that, I had a few suspicions. First of all, you can see that we change if a certain condition is 1, if a certain variable is 1, then basically the current level is now a different level. Which basically, when do you change the level number? First of all, you change the level number when you exit a warp zone, right? Because you finished the level, kinda, or when you basically finished a normal level. So that kind of told me that 573C is whether you're inside a warp zone right now or not. And another thing that was interesting is that word 6152 kind of maintains the old level number to restore. Why do you need to do that? Well, as I mentioned, the warp zones are kind of embedded in normal levels, but they're not not necessarily in the same level. For instance, this level, level 2, the right side of it is the warp zone of level 5. So somewhere, Dave has to remember, hey, go back to level 5 after you finish the warp zone, which is in level 2. So the way to do it is to save 5 somewhere, and this is exactly where it's saved. So this kind of gave me a lot of information, this pseudocode. And of course, I renamed all the variables later, but this is how I saw it at least. Of course, when you do any static analysis, it's like if you can debug, it's always a good idea to debug and validate your suspicions. I got to say that this is the first time that I work with the DOSBox debugger. And DOSBox debugger is really good. Like it exceeded my expectations. You can put breakpoints, you can dump memory, you can do whatever you like. Really, really fun to use if you're into that kind of stuff. Sorry. So at this point, our job is easier because that variable that I saw contains the old level to restore, right? So if that is read when we finish a level, write into it means that we're going to port into a warp zone. So I found it. That was actually the only place where that variable is being written to. And here is the pseudocode. I already renamed a few of the variables. So G-current warp zone mapping is actually is the kind of like the backup thing. And here what you can see is that the current level is being accessed by an array that is 16A. Starts at 16A and basically is treated as an array which is indexed by G current level 2, and each element has basically has 2 bytes in it. And there is a -1 that we're going to start talking about. More interestingly, that's the starting Y position for all warp levels, as I discovered. So that was pretty helpful. So as you can see, the new level is set to a value in an array, as I said, indexed by the current level with each element taking 2 bytes. The array contains the value 0002000671. Those things correspond to the warp zone mappings. So if you are at level 5 and you go to a warp zone, it basically tells you, hey, the warp zone for level 5 is in level 2. Interestingly, the levels are 0-based, but the array values are 1-based. So 2 actually corresponds to level 2, which in 0-based world will be 1. This is why you decrease 1 here. So that's interesting, and again, a proof that level 6 was never supposed to be a warp zone. What happens at level 6? So if you go out of bounds in level 6, you get a 0, right? But you decrease 1 from it. So if you know your math, you know that 0 minus 1 is FFFFF in or 65,535. That's correct because it's a 16-bit architecture. So words are really 16-bit values. And I added that to my parser. Basically, you can basically calculate where that thing would land. And this, I know it looks weird, but this actually corresponds to the same kind of like glitchy level that we saw. So so that kind of solves the mystery, and I added that to my parser as well, so you can see how it's supposed to look like. The question marks here, by the way, are really things that are not mapped to any tile. So this is why everything looks very, very glitchy. So that kind of is a cool thing. It's basically an out of bounds vulnerability. If like I really want to talk to MITRE and ask them to get CVE 1990-001 or whatever, but I don't think that will happen. Interestingly, I published that research, mostly with the Israeli hacking community earlier this year, and I got a lot of engagements from old-timers or just folks that were interested. And I got very interesting 2 questions. The first question is that going right on level 6, on the level 6 ceiling instead of going left actually gets you to a working warp zone instead of the buggy one. And why is that? And the second question was someone that told me that as a kid, they discovered that when they reach a score of 99,999 points, it gets you to a weird situation. Going back from the main menu, like you can hit escape, and then it asks you if you want to quit or not. If you go back from that, you'll get an extra life, like no matter what, unless you already had 3, of course, but then you can always trigger that. And why is that? So this is kind of like a recipe for infinite lives, if you will. So because like I already had in my head all the details, I decided to go an extra mile and start trying to answer these questions. The first question was very easy, and I almost immediately knew the answer. Going right on the level 6 ceiling actually gets you to a working warp zone. The reason for that is because this is level 6. If you go, and I'll try to zoom in, if you go all the way on the to the ceiling through the through the door and go right, you will actually get to the warp zone that is embedded in level 6. So you don't really go to a warp zone. The game doesn't think that you're in a warp zone. It just thinks that you're still in level 6. And so that kind of like is a very easy answer for that. Interestingly, by the way, you can get all the crowns and jewels and whatnot in that level, and then go back to this level again as a warp zone, and you can get those things twice. So kind of like an interesting thing to do if you want to boost your scores really bad. Um, think about infinite lives. We already know the variable that contains the level number. So I was trying to find initialization function. When you basically reset the game or when it's game over, it will reset. And finding that was very easy, basically writing on the level number. And I found that, and with some bit debugging, I gave those things names. So then I already know the number of lives. I know that the score and the next goal are basically two variables, and I'll explain why in a second. And the rest is pretty easy to figure out. Note that there are two variables that save the current score because it's 16-bit architecture and the maximum score exceeds FFFF. So you got to basically save the high word and the low word that represents the current score. So this is saved in G score low and G score high. And then the next goal is basically the next goal to get an extra life. If you remember, every 20,000 points, you get an extra life. So those two variables kind of save the next goal for you to get an extra life. So I cross-referenced those variables, and after some debugging, I revealed the right check. This is how the check looks like. It looks kind of scary, and this is pseudocode. I kind of removed all like a bunch of like stuff from it. And let's start dissecting it actually from the end. If you look at the end and look at some constants, 869F, and that's the G score low, and 1, which is G score high, corresponds exactly to 99,999, which is the maximum score. So the lower part here kind of tells me that, and if you can see that if the high bytes, the high word actually of the score exceeds 1, or the low part of the score exceeds this number, then basically you get the maximum amount of 99,999. There is no way to get beyond that maximum number. Now, this is the first thing. The second thing is that the value 42E0, this thing right here, is exactly 20,000, which is the goal that you have to reach every time to get an extra life. And lastly, the maximum number of lives is 3. As you can see, only if your lives is less than 3, then basically you gain an extra life. And then update sprite and play sounds are pretty obvious. This adds like another Dave picture next to the number of Daves that you have, and play sounds plays like a funny sound because you got an extra life. So that is kind of the check. And the first line in the pseudocode has the logic issue. And what it was meant to do, it was meant to check if the current score is bigger than the next goal. But because they split the variable to two words, low word and high word, they have a bug there. Debugging basically reveals that the next goal after 80,000 actually is 100,000, which should not be possible because of this. Like, you shouldn't be able to get to 100,000. So in 100,000, G score high is always 1, and G score low is 869F, right? Because that's the maximum score. And G next goal high is 1, and G next goal low is 86A0, which is 1 above 9F, if you think about it. But if you look at the condition that they had looks a bit funky. What they did here is they basically try to check if the next goal is bigger than the is lower than the score. But what they did it in a way that checks like the high bytes and then checks the low bytes. They did it in a way that says if G score high minus next level high, next goal high is which usually would be 1 or 0, is different than G score low is less than G next goal low. And because of that, or if the difference is beyond 20,000. So this thing actually is buggy. The first condition always holds because 0, which in these conditions is the evaluation of the left hand side, is always not equal to 1, which is the right hand side. So you always get here, and basically after you get to 99,999, this thing will always trigger, like every time. So that kind of explains why you always get extra lives if your lives is less than 3, if you get the maximum score. And what I discovered is that this function is called when you hit an object, like diamonds and stuff like that, which makes sense because your score is expected to increase. But also, this thing is getting called when getting back from the main menu. And my educated guess is that this was done in order to redraw the current score because the main menu kind of overrides the where it says where it writes your current score. And that kind of explains the second question. When you go back from the main menu, it tries to redraw, probably calls that function, which kind of has a logic bug in it that gets you infinite lives. So that's pretty cool. A little bit of summary. I've uploaded my level editor or parser and my research notes to my private blog, and you can have fun like doing something like this if you want to do something funny. This was supposed to be like the opening screen for Dave, but I wrote like funny stuff here and added diamonds everywhere. And many thanks to Shikari.net community. I've contributed my research notes there as well, just to make sure that the community has, all the information that they need if they ever want to do anything else with Dave. It was only like 2 days worth of work. It was a very cool weekend research, especially diving into Intel real mode analysis. And I still have awe at the memory saving techniques from the 1990s. I challenge you to find me a modern game that can fit a floppy disk even. It's very hard to find. And once in a while, get like occasional updates over Twitter or X. That's where I'm mostly at. And with that, thank you so much for attending.
Well, thank you, JBO, for an excellent presentation. I posted in the chat for our event here links to the Wikipedia articles about this and where you can get the game and where you can get DOSBox so you can run your own copy. So let's give a round of applause for our speaker. Thank him for an excellent talk.
Awesome. Thank you so much, folks.
And so we're going to have some, chat with people around you sort of thing. And we're going to queue up our